Okay, good morning. It is the beginning of chapter 25 of Peter Stearns, looking at the rise of a new modern Latin America. We are going to look at a case study of Argentina and the rise of liberal politics. You can easily go to your book around 680 and find a similar story about the rise of modern Mexico. Liberalism. The definition we're going to use for this is going to be a state-led reformist movement that focuses on developing a free society through government institutions. That the government is the only entity, especially large enough, to consolidate power to promote positive change. Speaking of positive, Auguste Comte promoted this definition of positivism in Europe. Positivism being the use of observation and scientific method to apply it to develop social reform. For example, many people are poor and homeless, without jobs, without food. The government can use tax dollars to give them some sort of shelter, some sort of food soup lines, maybe some sort of educating process, get them a job in short. This kind of will diminish the chance of rising up in violence and a French Revolution. Now, of course, we understand there's others people that would believe that this only causes people to be reliant on the government, such as a reform like that being a narcotic, and there's others who are going to worry about state debt. But let's just say positivism doesn't focus necessarily on those effects. It looks more at the process. And you'll see in the quote that I have up on screen, it's not that he's against theology, but he's against theology to define what a state will and will not do for the people. Now, from this liberal and positivism attitude, what you start to see in the 1800s is Latin America experiencing a spurt of economic growth fueled by increasing demand for raw materials, food, and tropical crops. Exports will go up, foreign investment will go up, population will go up, and you will see an emerging middle class. So let's talk about the story. So how did this happen? Let's take a look at case study Argentina. First of all, I'm going to see, you got my pointer here. You got to understand that in 1820-ish Argentina, there are two Argentinas. They are going to be the United Province of Rio de Plata, which is the outskirts here, who have, through many years of civil war, found themselves to be split. So here is not what we call Argentina yet, but the United Provinces of Rio de Plata, named for the river Rio de Plata. You're going to have people here in Buenos Aires who are going to be more liberal. They are often called centralists. On the outskirts of this, you're going to have the federalists, people that believe in having some centralized power, but a lot of power into the regions, into the states. Now these people, the federalists, were dominated by a group of people we call caudillos. These caudillos own large haciendas. They are rich landowners. Because there's a lot of ranching in the South, they're not just plantations, but they are also large ranches. And on these ranches are going to be a bunch of gauchos, shown here. A gaucho is a cowboy. So there are people who are about free and independence and regionalism. They are the caudillos, and their employees, the gauchos. And then there's going to be the more probably educated, urban, factory-based centralist liberals in the city. This isn't too far-fetched from today's standards. Caudillos sometimes have roving armies, so sometimes you could liken a caudillo to almost a Latin American version of a warlord, but of course they also occurred in other regions of Latin America, including Mexico. Now, these are two of the individuals we're going to talk about next. They're both going to be power hungry in Argentina. You will see that they are distinctly different. Look at how he's dressed and look how he's dressed. Start to think to yourself, how did this guy come to power? How did this guy come to power? How did this guy lead? How did this guy lead? And it's almost summarized in a picture. So first, let's talk about Juan Manuel de Rosas. He's the guy on the left here. Juan Manuel de Rosas led from 1831 to 1852, and he was a Federalist, so he believed in regional power. He was a true dictator. He led by decree. He had no constitution, and there was no branches of government. Now, he was largely supported by the Caudillos and the Gauchos. The people of the regions were allowed to become as rich as they wanted, so profits went up. And the money that was supposed to be collected for taxes was not really formally collected, not in Buenos Aires or around the regions. Now, he was a populist, talking about the fact that taxation and the burden of the state is not on their shoulders, that they are free to be as wealthy as they want. Now, yes, he was a dictator, but we can see, even from Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad recently, that you can be a quasi-dictator, but a populist the same. And maybe even use the name Hugo Chavez from Venezuela recently. Some would liken him to a more modern day dictator, but he was also a populist. Now, to play the role of a nationalist, Juan Manuel de Rosas played the nationalist card. He was anti-European. He limited trade with the British and French because he felt that the British and the French were only going to take advantage of him, and he wanted to have the upper hand. He wanted to have control. He also squashed Native Americans in the South in order to expand ranching. By the way, I think that is literally word for word Peter Stearns at the bottom there. Drinking my coffee. So, he eventually is going to be replaced after some year of infighting by Domingo Sarmiento. Domingo Sarmiento, shown up here, a little bit different. He's a college educated. He is not a Caudillo. He is of Buenos Aires. He is in power because of the Argentine Republic, which creates the modern state of Argentina. He led from 1862 to 1890, so for 30 years he led through constitutional democracy. He was assigned the president. He was a centralist, so he believed power should go through Buenos Aires, the central government. The urbans supported him, especially in Buenos Aires. Taxes were collected, especially on foreign trade. This allowed reforms to be implemented that could then be benefited to all, such as a formal education in the urban areas, develop a train and postal system that could only have been done by the centralist government using tax dollars. And the people followed suit. For example, the Caudillos. If the Caudillos wanted to trade through Buenos Aires and benefit in any of this profit sharing and reforms, the Caudillos had to buy in, and they did. They are going to become the emerging middle class. Instead of being the warlords of the earlier 1800s under the Manuel de Rosas era, they are going to start to become a more stable middle class, allowing Buenos Aires to dictate the law. To promote trade, Sarmiento is going to be pro-European. He's going to welcome them into the ports. This will allow trade to increase 5 times between 1860 and 1890. However, you see a distinct similarity in terms of continuity and change. He will still squash Native Americans in the South to expand ranching. So by the turn of the century, things were looking good in 1880. They had a stable economy, natural urbanization. They had stable dealings with Native Americans. The Native Americans were not able to rise up and challenge the central state authority. They were able to improve their nation through the help of some technology, especially because of refrigerated shipment cars, railroad cars that were helping them trade their beef from the region of Argentina throughout Latin America and, of course, to Buenos Aires specifically. Their population will have a natural increase. There will be immigration during this time. By 1914, a third of their population will be foreign born. People are coming to Buenos Aires and they're coming to Argentina specifically, regionally, and per the season. Golondrinas, or the swallows as they're called, were those who traveled to come to Argentina for the seasons. They would work in the ranches, they would work in the fields. This is especially the Italians. You will find, especially in World War II, there are a lot of connections between Argentina and its population and the population of Europe. The culture, well, there's a video clip of the tango, and we can maybe talk about that in class. I'm not going to show it right now. Lastly, liberalism, urbanization, socialism, unionization, political reform are all elements of the 1880-1900 time period in Argentina. I'm not saying this is only going to get better. They're going to have a lot of rough patches in the future, sometimes because of their liberalism, sometimes because of the role of urbanization, the impact of socialism, the challenges of dealing with the unions, and the fact that some want to stifle political reform. All right, I think that's good for today. You all take care.